Arcimoto is an electric vehicle manufacturer which is going to be launching their flagship three-wheeled vehicle, the FUV, which stands for Fun Utility Vehicle. They also feature a delivery-focused vehicle and a patrol vehicle, but all three of those seem to be built on an identical platform with rather minor differences. And they're happy to show off their delivery version of the vehicle, as well as their rapid response vehicle. Electric vehicle stocks have been blowing up recently, and Arcimoto has definitely been in the limelight. I have a whole series of videos on upcoming stocks in this sector, and I'll have a link in the description to a playlist of those videos. Arcimoto, as a company, has been around for a while. They've been designing prototypes since 2007. Their entire history page is actually quite interesting. They've been through a lot of different designs, with some of their earlier models resembling something like the Solo from Electromechanica. I think the closest resemblance is the Generation 3 Pulse. Both seem to have that car-like look, well, three-wheeled car. There have been a shocking amount of prototypes developed over the years. Really, this company has had tons of prototypes and developments. I've seen some videos of Sandy Munro, the engineer who tears apart cars to analyze them, mentioning that Arcimoto was working with him, which is rather interesting. This company seems to really want to improve and iterate on what they're doing. They obviously are placing an emphasis on launching a good product and a functioning product. But then you also have to step back and realize that, hey, for over a decade they've been creating prototypes, saying they'll sell them, and then they never end up selling them and just create a new prototype. And really, that's a huge issue I see. This all started in 2007. And it took them how long to actually release a vehicle? I understand this sort of stuff does not happen overnight, but this really strikes me as the opposite of lean. This is an unacceptable amount of time to go without the release of a commercial product. I know people often say better to be late and done well rather than early and awful, but honestly, this isn't very true. Having spent a lot of time in the engineering field, especially in manufacturing, successful companies, the rock stars, are the ones that release things in reasonable amounts of time with solid quality. This should be exacerbated by having a smaller startup-style company rather than a big, bloated corporate entity. If you go to their website right now and click on the pre-order button, you're greeted to just that, a pre-order, not the ability to purchase the vehicle right now. And to be fair, they have had smaller deliveries in the past, but just look at these numbers. In 2019, they manufactured 53 FUVs and delivered 46 units by the end of 2019. They made 53 units that whole year. So in Q4 alone, the company built more vehicles than in the previous 12 years combined. Now, their pre-orders are way higher, but that's just a ridiculously small amount. I mean, I'm glad they're actually building and delivering some vehicles, but this is such an insanely slow process. Companies like AYRO, while super small, do have reasonably sized factories, factory expansions, and triple-digit delivery numbers in the matter of a few years. I mean, AYRO started in 2017, and they already have tons of sponsorships and are selling a bunch of their vehicles. The market changes with time, and it's dangerous to be slow. This company has had a lot of time and has made very little progress. And surprise, surprise, the company has negative earnings per share, like almost every single electric vehicle manufacturer we take a look at. Now, as I said earlier, they definitely do seem to take pride in their vehicle, and a lot of time has been spent refining it. So assuming they can scale production, let's take a more serious look at the Fun Utility Vehicle. Taking a look at it, it's difficult to not compare it to something like the Electromechanica Solo, which is a three-wheeled compact electric vehicle, and I think the general analysis is going to be very similar for them. Immediately, the price stands out to me. An ultra-compact vehicle like this should never, ever be within spitting distance of a Corolla or Civic, especially since manufacturer rebates are so common these days. I don't care if it's electric or if it runs off unicorn farts. That's just insane. It really is. If you look at the top 10 vehicles that have been selling the best in 2020 and 2019 and 2018, in this modern era we live in, the only cars on the list have been Corollas and Civics. And, well, maybe the Camry. All these small Japanese vehicles. Now, long-term maintenance, it might be a little cheaper once you account for gas and everything, but these cars are so fuel efficient, so reliable, and it's really just insane to offer something that is more expensive with way less utility. Again, people in the US have not been buying small vehicles. The only ones selling are those three, at least the only ones selling in big numbers. I will say the FUV does have a better 0 to 60 time than the Solo of 6.5 seconds, which is pretty good compared to popular vehicles in America, but again, the most popular vehicles in America are very, very big, fat, slow vehicles. For the most part, speed has not been a concern for the average American car buyer, which is kind of a shame, since electric vehicles can have pretty impressive performance with relatively small motors. The FUV does have 2 powered wheels compared to the single of the Solo, and the FUV can actually hold 2 people. From the looks of it, it probably has more carrying capacity if you utilize the back seat. However, I really do think most of the things I've said about this style of vehicle in my Solo video hold true for this vehicle. I'm going to pull a clip from that video just because I feel like I would be completely repeating myself. The trend has been towards larger vehicles. Companies like Ford and GM have straight up stopped selling cars other than select performance or luxury models, like the Mustang, which is very low volume compared to most of their vehicles. Even in electric vehicles, you see Tesla say the Model Y will be their most popular vehicle, or at least they expect it to, simply because it's the cheapest SUV they make. Additionally, auto manufacturers who are dipping their toes into electric vehicles aren't making cars typically. The Ford Mach-E, the Audi e-tron, Jaguar I-Pace, Mercedes EQC, NIO has built their entire company on SUVs alone, in Asia of all places. There are a lot of reasons for that. 1, SUVs are insanely popular. 2, you have a lot of space to work with, so you can brute force certain things like range. 3, they're seen as more useful, and 4, they're seen as safer. So why do I think this weakness is also a strength? Well, SUVs are big, major market vehicles, especially in North America. That's the sandbox that all the big boys are playing in, so if Electromechanica entered the SUV space, it would have to seriously be competitive. Since they're going after a niche, they will have far less competition, but also a huge cap on their maximum growth until they can get into different vehicle classes. As for their niche, I'm scared it's too small. The thing is very clearly not a motorcycle, but in most states, it will likely be considered a motorcycle or autocycle and deal with things like laws and other regulations that go along with that. It also doesn't help the perception of the vehicle. These small 3-wheeled vehicles are going to be viewed as a motorcycle-ish vehicle, like a motorcycle. And that mentality is really bad. Motorcycling has been declining year after year. Motorcycle sales are down and down and down. Personally, I ride motorcycles. I really love it. But the view motorcycles get, especially among young people, just seems to be dramatically different than what it used to be. People value safety in vehicles a lot more nowadays, and you're way less safe in a smaller vehicle. There's a lot of data and studies on this, and it's important to look at the studies because they try to correct for certain issues that could prop up and make things inaccurate. But generally, the larger and heavier your vehicle is, the safer you will be during a collision. Women especially prefer SUVs, and women are responsible for around 45% of all vehicle purchases in the US. Really, when it comes to the mentality of smaller vehicles and mainly motorcycles, it's honestly kind of shocking how often I mention I ride in a conversation and people say stuff like, "Oh my God, that's so scary, I could never do that," or, "Damn, you really must have a death wish, huh?" I try to explain my perspective, why I ride, why I enjoy it, but millennials are really not into motorcycles. Obviously, you have some young people who are going 180 down the freeway in their Gixxer, wearing a t-shirt, but for the most part, motorcycling and the view of motorcycle-like vehicles in North America is negative. Now, I have a lot of anecdotal stories, but the statistics don't lie. Motorcycles have become less and less popular, especially among young people. That's pretty shocking when you realize you can pick up a running, working, fuel-injected motorcycle for $1,500 or less. it's an incredibly low barrier to entry cost-wise until you get into maintenance like valve adjustments and rear tires. Moms, girlfriends, and wives hate motorcycles. Again, the Solo very clearly isn't a motorcycle, but it's about perception. I can already hear it in the back of my head. Honey, I really don't like you riding that thing to work. Can't you just take the Camry? Please, for me. A lot of guys stop riding once they have a kid. Really, once people get married or they have a kid, they tend to grab an SUV, minivan, and stop riding motorcycles. This small vehicle isn't going to be considered safe by a lot of people, and it will be difficult to change the perception of this small, three-wheeled, made-in-China vehicle that is legally classified as a motorcycle and requires a motorcycle license in some states. And this is something you really have to be aware of. The actual people going out and purchasing and driving vehicle sales are likely going to reject this for the most part. You're going to have an incredibly small market, especially as more and more data comes out showing just how unsafe smaller vehicles are compared to these huge SUVs that are widely popular and widely accepted as a standard in North America now. Again, it's not a motorcycle, and it is a little different because it's more car-like, but when we look at Can-Am three-wheelers, they have an appeal to people just barely outside of the interest circle of motorcycles, and a little more for vehicles like the Polaris Slingshot, which actually has a steering wheel. Another thing to consider is the laws. In the United States, we have vehicles like this, the Polaris Slingshot, a three-wheeled vehicle with a steering wheel, much like the Solo. There are a few states that require a motorcycle endorsement. Just take a look at this map. Obviously, the big appeal of this vehicle is in urban areas, and you're going to be killing a lot of your sales in hugely urban areas like New York. Take a look at this map as well. A lot of states have required helmet laws. Now, are cops going to pull you over in these states if you're in an enclosed vehicle not wearing a helmet? Probably not. But if you have dealers in those states, are those businesses going to technically violate the law during test rides? If someone dies in this thing due to the worst crash rating, and maybe it becomes news, will the mayor or parents of the dead person raise hell about helmet laws not being enforced? It's complicated. Helmets aren't comfortable, and that's going to hurt a lot of the appeal for this vehicle. You are looking at a market of people willing to drive these smaller motorcycle-like vehicles. So most people with kids or who are settling down are cut out. If you have a significant other, how are you going to move the two of you around? This can't be a primary vehicle then. Young people are really turned off from these style of vehicles. Maybe you could get some mid-20 urbanites, but a lot of these people live in major cities like Chicago or New York. When I was in Chicago, I walked everywhere, I took public transportation, and I used ride-sharing apps. I didn't actually own a car. And then you have to consider what proportion of those people are willing to ride a motorcycle. Why would you buy something that is way more expensive, way slower, and way less cool? Not to mention, if you're in California, you can't lane split with this thing like you can with a motorcycle, which is kind of crazy when you consider they're launching it in LA. Maybe there would be an appeal for winter riding, but for winter riding, you'd probably want a four-wheel drive vehicle, or a vehicle with just four wheels, period. I know in a lot of cities they do a very poor job of taking care of the roadways during winter. Chicago actually does a surprisingly good job. But then you also have to consider urban areas like LA, where they're launching this thing, where you can ride a motorcycle year-round, basically. A motorcycle can hold 2 or more people. This holds 1 person. And if you're riding a bagger, you might be able to hold more cargo if you're in a Goldwing. Their pre-order numbers aren't bad, but are these things going to really sell year after year? They're working on this Roadster, and I'm sure they'll go after other vehicles in the future, but I seriously wonder how many sales this company will get. How long will it take for them to turn a profit? Will they turn a profit? Will they run out of investor money? They haven't sold a single vehicle in the traditional sense yet. It's all been extremely controlled small distribution. And I'm sort of scared that they're not going to start off strong. I really like the enthusiasm this company has, the willingness to go and talk about their product, show it off, and keep people updated on the factory. They have tons of great updates on their website, but I find it very hard to see this as a successful product personally. I think it's probably too niche to offer it at a reasonable price. And I think most people would agree with me. Currently, they're saying the MSRP of the 2020 model is $18,500. You can buy a brand new Honda Civic or Toyota Corolla for less than $2,000 more. And especially with all the rebates and incentives manufacturers are offering, you can buy a brand new 2021 Corolla for less than you can buy the Solo. That's a little crazy when you consider just how reliable, fuel efficient, and capable these cars are. I really love the Corolla. It's so reliable, easy to maintain, surprising amount of space, and it's not that particularly large. You can squeeze it into most parking lots. Remember, the Solo is not a motorcycle. You can't squeeze it into motorcycle type slots. So really, you'd only have an advantage over something like a Corolla or Civic if you live in a very, very tight, maybe English city or something. Well, I guess the English aren't the only ones with tight roads. A lot of places in Europe are like that. But you won't be able to buy one in Europe because it's launching in North America, in LA, where everyone is driving around Corollas from the 80s because they're so unbelievably reliable and cheap to maintain and run. I don't have the same concerns about the company like I did NKLA, but I do find it hard to see their current flagship taking off. Yes, a lot of people commute to work on their own, but again, something like a Corolla can fit 5 people compared to 1. Maybe I'm wrong. They could have a lot of market data and believe they will make a profit off this product, but it just seems so unlikely to me, especially with the direction that the average consumer is going in North America. The company seems to be taking things seriously with all the engineering work and iterations they've done. I don't think it's vaporware, and I don't think they're trying to scam anyone. I think the employees of this company really care about their product. It's just my main concern is that they're selling what looks to be a very unpopular product in the US market as their flagship. And before you stop and say this would be great on European roads or something where everything is tight and small and we live in tiny little cities, like the Solo, this is an American-made product being launched in America. And before you say that this would have a huge appeal in Europe where roads are smaller, cities are smaller, they don't go cross country, stuff like that, this product, like the Solo, is only being sold in the United States. And they actually aren't accepting international reservations, and who knows how long it'll take for them to try to have a worldwide presence. And that would be very difficult because this doesn't fall into the category of a car in most countries. So for likely years, this is going to be a US only product. I would really like to see what market data they have, what their margins look like, and other factors, but it's hard for me to say this stock is a solid buy if you're looking at things over the long term. Another big concern for me is the insanely small numbers of deliveries after the decades of R&D they've done. They seem to be generating a lot of money by selling shares as well. This company is going to have earnings released on August 19th, 2020, so perhaps this will give us a larger glimpse on how the company is progressing and how pre-order numbers look. But again, a pre-order, while you do have to put money down for this vehicle, it doesn't guarantee a sale. And we need to know how many they need to sell to break even on their investments.